Whatever happened to predictability? The milkman, the paperboy, evening TV. You miss your old familiar friends, but waiting just around the bend. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, there's a lust of somebody who needs you. You're lost out there and you're all alone. Life is waiting to carry you home. Everywhere you look.
Oh, I didn't see you there. You know, I was just reading this book, Justice by Michael J. Sandel. So it talks a lot about Kant's morality. It's pretty good. It's time to get serious, folks. First, let's talk a little bit about Kant's life. Kant was born in Königsberg, Prussia in 1724 and died in 1804 at the age of 79. While there, Kant attended the College of Königsberg, where he entered there at the age of 16, and stayed there until the age of 31, where he became a lecturer and lectured on the topics of metaphysics, logic, laws, geography, physics, and ethics. Kant's philosophical works were based off the ideas of autonomy, upon which were the ideas of God, freedom, and immortality. A majority of his works came off the balance between empiricism and rationalism. He did not believe in either, but instead utilized parts in each to help influence his own philosophical works. As empiricists believe morality comes from experience, and rationalists believes it comes out of reason, Kant rejects both of these ideals, but makes use of certain aspects of it. He believes that experience is purely subjective, unless if it is only enacted by reason.
Another key concept of Kant's philosophy is his view on morality. The moral law is that it is our duty to act morally right at all times. Within this, he begins to talk about the idea of human dignity, in which he argues against using people as a means to an end, and instead to treat everyone with the respect that they deserve. Kant believes that the motive of an action is morally more important than the consequence of our action. This is because we can control what we do, but can't control the responses of these actions. He also believes that the members of society can have seemingly positive traits, such as courage, but not be morally good. By this he means that people are defined by their intentions rather than their qualities. But Kant also argues that our moral behavior will not determine our happiness. However, our intentions is the factor on which happiness is attained by. Kant's next ideal regards the concept of freedom. Freedom, defined by Kant, is to act autonomously. This means that we live by laws we give ourselves, rather than being controlled by natural instincts or social convention. Opposite to this is the idea of heteronomy, which does not suppress our appetites and desires, but rather embraces them. This means that we are dictated by our wants and or standards set in place by others. Also, Kant's believe that if you give yourself no laws to abide by, you are not truly free, but it is rather a random accident. Kant divides moral law by categorical and hypothetical. Categorical is the idea when it is universal, while hypothetical is conditional. Of these two, he supports categorical, because he believes morality is not an option and you must act moral at all times. Kant believes in another ideal that considers intelligible and sensible realms. Intelligible means being rational in a natural world, with sensible means acting toward your instincts in the world.
I love you. I can't be doing this. Don't leave me. I need you.
Before the book, Dimsdale is a -5 because he fails to do his job as a pastor. On page 220 it says that, "People of New England," cried he with a voice that rose over them high, solemn, and majestic, yet had always a tremor through it, and sometimes a shriek, struggling up out of fathomless depth of remorse and woe. "Ye that have loved me, ye that have deemed me holy. Behold me here, the one sinner of the world. As a pastor, Dimsdale is expected to be a symbol of purity and a model citizen for his society, but he gives into his inclination and is pursuing his pleasure, and this compels him to have sex with Hester. Dimsdale is also acting heteronomously for the laws of nature and society as a result. Dimsdale is not being rational and was too influenced by his emotions and is consequently being controlled by them as he is being compelled to fulfill his desires. Dimsdale also disregards moral law, as it is his duty as a pastor to remain celibate, which he fails to do so.
I think we should take away Pearl, because Hester isn't fit to be a mother.
No, don't take away my Pearl.
Dimsdale?
Dimsdale, help me.
I think Hester is a fitting mother for Pearl. You should keep her.
So, in chapter 8, Dimsdale moves up to a 2 in this chapter because he begins to fulfill his duty as a father to Pearl. On page 101, it says that, "Oh, not so, not so," continued Mr. Dimsdale. "She recognizes, believe me, the solemn miracle which God hath wrought in the existence of that child." This shows that Dimsdale is defending the right for Hester to keep Pearl as her daughter, instead of handing her over to a Puritan couple. By doing so, Dimsdale is also acting of his own beliefs, and is thus acting autonomously instead of heteronomously. But by following his own beliefs, Dimsdale is directly breaking his duty as a pastor. As a pastor, Dimsdale should fully support the ideals of a Puritan society and take Pearl away from Hester, as Hester is encouraging the concepts of nonconformity in Pearl, specifically in the way she dresses and is allowed to act.
I think private shame is more painful than public shame.
Why would you say that?
I don't know, it's just a thought.
Dimsdale moves up to a 5. He is a 5 in this chapter because he is acting autonomously as the effects of his private shame take effect, and he now acts and thinks according to what he believes is just, not Puritan law. This is seen in page 118 when he is asked, "Is Hester Prynne the less miserable, think you, for that scarlet letter on her breast?" And he responds, "I do verily believe it." In earlier parts of the chapter, he still maintains his duty as a minister, but as he becomes more aware of the sin around him, and he also becomes aware of his duty to Hester and Pearl as well. Also, through this, he is following the law set by him on what he should do in such an instance, and of which follows them. Categorically, he believes that now his sinful behavior is how all people act and should act.
To
In chapter 11, Dimsdale moves down to a -3 because in this chapter he begins to use himself as a means to an end in order to ease the guilt inside of him. This is seen on page 126 to 127 as he attempts to inflict pain on himself and serves vigils alone in order to try and compensate for the pain he caused Hester and alleviate the mental pain he is experiencing. Thus, his actions are immoral because his inclination for doing so is also wrong. But he does not fall down any further because he is not only fulfilling his duty as a pastor, but also excelling at it because he is able to connect to his fellow sinners on a level he wasn't able to do before.
come here, Pearl. Your father wants to see us. Come here. Come here, Pearl. Come here, Pearl. No!
In chapter 19, Dimsdale suddenly increases to a 1 because he is not acting rationally, but also starts acting with a morality that he sets himself as established in chapter 18 on page 174. He says, "The minister, on the other hand, had never gone through an experience calculated to lead him beyond the scope of generally received laws, although in a single instance he had so fearfully transgressed one of the most sacred of them. But this had been a sin of passion, not of principle, nor even purpose. The events that took place in the forest caused him to become fueled by his emotions, and caused him to abandon his duty as a pastor. as he begins to plan his escape from society. So Dimsdale is treating this situation as a hypothetical imperative, as he is acting solely for the sake of being with Hester. But in this chapter, Dimsdale begins to fulfill his duty as a father and husband to his family.
Dimsdale, will I ever see you again?
No, you don't get it.
No!
In chapter 23, Dimsdale once again moves up to a 5 in this chapter, as he finally achieves the balance between his duty as a pastor and his duty as a father. He is able to become free as he finally sees what is wrong with society and acts according to the categorical imperative of what citizens should act like, not rejecting sin, but accepting it. This leads him to do the morally right thing by speaking the truth to the citizens of the society. Dimsdale also acts autonomously, as he is now following his own beliefs and what he thinks is right, instead of following what society has tried to tell him to say and do as a Puritan pastor. This is seen on page 219, when he says, "I withheld myself from doing 7 years ago. Come hither now, entwine thy strength around me. Thy strength, Hester, but let it be guarded by the will which God hath granted me.
Tony, I'll do it.
Old Roger Chillingworth throughout life had been calm in temperament, kindly, though not of warm affections, but ever and in all his relations with the world a pure and upright man. He had begun an investigation, as he had imagined, with the severe and equal integrity of a judge, desirous only of truth, even as if the question involved no more than the air-drawn lines and figures of a geometrical problem instead of human passions and wrongs inflicted on himself." This quote in chapter 10, page 113, describes Chillingworth before the book. Roger Chillingworth is ranked a 5 because he is seen as a pure and upright man. Chillingworth is deemed as intelligible as he is shown as a rational being in society. The novel displays Chillingworth as acting categorical, as he is acting morally at all times from what we know of him so far. Also, it is portrayed that he has been secluded in the forest for some time now, living with the Native Americans. With this, Chillingworth is acting autonomously, as he is no longer tempted by society's wants or desires, as he is not a part of it. There is no reason to expect that he is immoral, as no other view is provided of him before the novel.
Who's that?
That's Hester.
Okay.
Chillingworth moves down to a 3 in chapter 3 because when he states that thus she will be a living sermon against sin until the ignominious letter be engraved upon her tombstone. Through this, Chillingworth is acting heteronomously rather than autonomously, as he is being too controlled by his emotions and is not thinking clearly. Also, the fact that he is agreeing with society and that Hester should be punished for her sin shows the extent of which he is being controlled by society's laws and not acting according to his own. Also, he promotes the idea of using Hester as a way to dead her sin, in which is using her as a means to an end which is immoral. However, his motive for arriving in the city is still to pursue the truth of Hester's affair, so he is still of positive morality.
Hester, who's the father?
I'm not gonna tell you
It's fine, I'll investigate anyways.
if you do that.
In chapter 4, Chillingworth continues to move down to a -1 because despite the fact that Chillingworth is fulfilling his role as a doctor by taking care of Hester and Pearl, regardless of his negative sentiments toward them, his underlying motive switches from pursuing the truth to extracting revenge, which is not of benevolent nature. This is shown on page 69. "But Hester, the man lives who has wronged us both." On page 69, it also says, "Thou wilt not reveal his name, not the less he is mine." It continues and it says, "He bears no letter of infamy wrought into his garment as thou dost, but I shall read it on his heart." He aims not to lose his honor as a man from a cheating wife, so he acts in his self-interest as well. This is shown on page 70. "Because I will not encounter the dishonor that
besmirches the husband of a faithless woman. Chillingworth plans on taking revenge against Dimmesdale and is therefore acting heteronomously rather than autonomously. He has become a slave to his fulfilling his motives of vengeance and is consequently not acting freely. However, he is also understanding towards Hester and puts no blame on her, so he does not reach any more of a negative rating. Chillingworth sees a dip in the moral charts as he moves to a -3 because it is implied that his intentions are to seek revenge, and in Kant's philosophy, where intentions is the basis for happiness, it is immoral. This is shown on page 106 when he says, "Why, with such rank in the learned world, had he come hither? What could he whose sphere was in great cities be seeking in the wilderness?" This is also shown on page 107. This idea was countenanced by the strong interest which the physician ever manifested in the young clergyman. He is acting heteronomously as Chillingworth is being controlled by his motives of revenge. Also, Chillingworth is using Dimmesdale as a means of satisfying his goal of vengeance, which according to Kant is morally unjust. It is literally stated later in the chapter that Chillingworth grows closer to the truth of Dimmesdale and becomes more impassioned by it. This is shown on page 109. So Roger Chillingworth, the man of skill, the kind and friendly physician, strove to go deep into his patient's bosom, delving among his principles, prying into the recollections and probing everything with a cautious touch, like a treasure seeker in a dark cavern.
Aha!
In chapter 10, Chillingworth drops to a -5 because his intention to find out who Pearl's father is immoral. He becomes obsessed with this quest for revenge upon Dimmesdale, as it is described, like a miner searching for gold, or rather, like a sexton delving into a grave, possibly in quest of a jewel that had been buried on the dead man's bosom, but likely to find nothing save morality and corruption. On page 113. He neglects his duty as a physician and is instead ruled by his inclination of satiating his revenge. He continually implies he knows the truth to Dimmesdale and uses him as a means to extract the truth to reveal his sin to everyone. This is shown on page 119 when he says, "Thus a sickness, a sore place, if we may so call it, in your spirit hath immediately its appropriate manifestation in your bodily frame." This would not be a universal law to be vindictive, so his imperatives are hypothetical. Here, Chillingworth meets none of the requirements of Kantian morality and disrespects human dignity, so he is a -5.
Here, Pearl, I give all my land to you.
In chapter 24, after a constant rating of -5, Chillingworth goes up to a -3 because of his actions of giving his fortune to Pearl. This is shown on page 225 when it says, "He bequeathed a very considerable amount of property, both here and in England, to little Pearl, the daughter of Hester Prynne." Through this, he is trying to do his duty as Hester's husband, to help provide for Pearl. Also, his intent is to benefit Pearl, not himself, so he is no longer acting according to inclination. Although his actions were still made heteronomously, and this one action only cannot constitute his actions as universally just.
The first trend we see on the graph is the inverse correlation between Dimmesdale and Chillingworth from before the book to chapter 10. Chillingworth begins at a 5 and Dimmesdale at the polar opposite, -5. Here we see Chillingworth as an upright and pure physician and Dimmesdale as a corrupt pastor not doing his duty. The reason for the opposite correlation is the change in intent for both characters. Chillingworth no longer seeks the truth but revenge, and we see his descent. When Chillingworth enters society again, we see his motive change as he sees Hester upon his scaffold and his interview with his former wife. After he sees the shame brought upon Hester, he wishes to not experience the same shame from being a weak husband and vows to exact revenge on the adulterer. Dimmesdale begins to see not out of inclination in society's laws, but from duty to Hester and his own morality. This change is spurred by the effects of the private shame on Dimmesdale, providing a revelation on sinful behavior. Now being a sinner himself, he sees the flaws of society's laws and to preach these findings to what he believes to be a universal law. At the end of these two changes within these characters, we see Chillingworth at a -5 and Dimmesdale at a 5. We see the intersection of these two characters between chapters 7 and 8 at a value of about -1. In these chapters, we see Chillingworth begin to manifest his desire for revenge as he uses both Pearl and Dimmesdale himself as means to reveal the truth and exact his revenge. Dimmesdale now begins to accept his duty to Hester and Pearl, and also does what he believes to be moral against what the governor and the other ministers believe to be moral. The two meet at a negative value because Chillingworth becomes increasingly more immoral than Dimmesdale can become good. Dimmesdale still does not understand the full implications and consequences of his sin, so he has still yet to live fully autonomously and fulfill his duty as a minister once again. Chillingworth, however, shirks his duty as a physician to get revenge on Dimmesdale and will use any means to do so, not respecting the dignity of humans. The next trend we see is a parallel from chapters 11 to 17. However, this explanation is very simple. Dimmesdale does not appear in chapters 11 through 17, and Chillingworth stays constantly immoral. His intent does not change, and neither do his methods or his means. The last trend is a parallel from chapter 23 to 24. Chillingworth stays negative, but rises as he tries to amend his actions with Pearl, and his intent is to assist Pearl. However, this does not constitute as enough to be moral, but gives him a slight rise in morality. He still lives heteronomously when judging sin, and thinks mainly of how to do X in order to get Y for anything to be categorical. But he now does a small part in his duty to Hester and Pearl. Dimmesdale takes a large rise in morality as he achieves balance in religious duty and familial duty. He still lives according to the moral code he gives himself, but tries to apply it to the rest of society as well, making it a categorical imperative as his actions can be seen as moral universally now. Although we see both characters rise in their morality, only Dimmesdale can be considered significant in the change of his character.